Hi everyone, and welcome back to another video of the series API testing using Postman. Today we'll be discussing why API testing is important. By now we know what are APIs. We also know how do they work and what are the different types of APIs. In today's session we will cover what is API testing, why API testing is important, types of API testing, and things to consider before you begin API testing. Let's start with what is API testing. If we just think of a goal of generic testing term, what we do in testing, we identify inconsistencies or deviations from the expected behavior. So similarly, main aim of API testing is to verify that all API endpoints are working as expected. So API testing is done when an application interacts with an API. There are many aspects of API testing, including functionality, performance, security, and reliability. Moving on to why API testing is important. If we consider an application often have three layers: a presentation layer where UI testing takes place, then a business layer where API testing takes place, and the third one is a data layer. So the business layer, it contains the business logic of an application. Whenever we build any web or mobile application, the main foundation is some business logic. Business logic is like rules, for example, how users will interact with data or services of the application. So before we proceed to UI testing, logic of the application needs to be tested. It's very, very important. And as it's between the presentation and the data layer, it ensures that the functionality, performance, etc. is as expected of data-driven applications. If we think of API testing, it's totally different than UI testing. So UI testing focuses more on that end user experience is as per the requirements, while API testing concentrates more on business rules. So the best approach is to test both API and UI. Moving on, let's have a look at this testing pyramid. In automated testing, there is a basic concept of this testing pyramid. This is very well explained by Mike Cohn in his book, Succeeding with Agile Software Development Using Scrum. It gives us an idea of what to test first and how much effort needs to put on each level. So as we can see, the need for automating the test increases from top to bottom. Let's have a look at the bottom layer. So unit test is the first layer which is performed by the developers while they are writing the code. Secondly, it's the service layer where API testing is done. And at the end, at the top of this pyramid, there is UI, which is where UI testing takes place. So it's not possible for UI testing to cover each and every aspect of functionality of the application and API services. And there is also a possibility that there are bugs at service layer or even at unit level as well, which can result in delaying a release and will actually increase the cost of fixing the defects. We already know that one of the principles of testing is to start testing early. If we identify issues at unit or service layer and fix them, they will not creep up to UI layer and less testing time will be spent in this layer. So API testing is not dependent on UI at all. So even if UI is not ready, API test can proceed. We can do API testing ahead of UI testing. And nowadays many companies are making shift left towards DevOps, continuous integration and continuous deployment, which means that a quick feedback is required in order to identify that the apps are ready or not for the release. And API testing can definitely help with this. Another important point is that API tests are easier to maintain as compared to UI tests. UIs are frequently changing, which means that the tests are being constantly updated or rewritten in order to keep up with the changes. API changes are less frequent, and refactoring API tests are more quicker and easier. Yes, API tests are very important. There are a lot of advantages, but it definitely doesn't mean that we do not need to perform any testing at UI level. We still need UI testing. Actually, each level in this testing pyramid has its own significance, and there are few defects which can be identified only at UI level, as that's the only level in which there are tests which are validating the user experience. Let's have a quick look on few different types of API testing. There are many types of API testing, and we will just quickly discuss a few of them. The first one is functional. The API does exactly what is supposed to do. Means like all business rules are implemented correctly and correct outputs are returned in the correct format. So all this is tested in functional API testing. The next one is security. The API has defined security requirements, including authentication, access controls, and permissions. So basically, security testing of APIs ensures that API implementation is secure from potential security attacks. It includes the access control of API, user permission management, and validation of authorization to access the resources. Moving on, performance. The API can handle a large amount of calls, etc. So there is a lot of testing which we can perform under performance of API testing. So we can also check that whether it delivers response within an acceptable time frame, and usually performance testing is performed to see that how API responds to both normal and peak traffic, etc. Then we have negative testing, which is like checking for every wrong input the user can possibly enter. So we can check that API reactions to failures or unexpected inputs. Before you begin API testing, okay, so there are a few things which we need to plan before we start actually doing API testing. The first one is to understand the API requirements, that what is the purpose of this API? What's the functionality of this API? What would be the workflow of this API? So to understand that is very important. Secondly, the team knowledge. So the team which will be working on the API's development or testing, what's the, actually not development, only testing, what's the prior knowledge, what are the expertise in terms of API testing of that team, whether they are skilled enough to perform API testing, or are they new and they need any kind of specific training for API testing. Next comes setting up a test environment, which includes configuring the database and server for the application's requirements. So just like any kind of testing, when you are performing API testing as well, it's really important that you first set up a testing environment so that you know that you have everything in place before you begin API testing. Then once the testing environment is in place, then before you start your thorough testing, you just test one API call just to make sure that you are getting the desired response. And if everything is working well, then of course you can continue with the rest of your testing. Defining the test plan. For API testing as well, we do need a proper test plan. And next comes selecting the right API test tool. Okay, so there are lots of tools available for API testing, but how do you choose the right one? And the answer is very simple. We have to choose the API testing tool that fits the specific needs of your project and your team. And for this series to test API, we will be using the tool known as Postman. Reporting. It includes the reporting of both execution and also the defect as well. And so that needs to be think beforehand that what kind of tools you are using for defect reporting, what would be the format and etc. So whatever the reporting is needed for API testing, that needs to be planned ahead. The bottom line is that if APIs do not work effectively and efficiently, they can break the chain of processes which is associated with every application. So API testing helps organizations to ensure that the application meets the user expectations. And by using the right tools and expertise, API testing not only complements the existing testing efforts, but it also contributes in additional benefits to your overall testing goals. I hope you found this session useful. In the next session, we will finally start working on Postman. We will install Postman, and I will introduce you to some basic features of Postman. So that would be really, really exciting. So I hope you will join me in my next video as well. Till then, take care.